So good evening, everybody. The bird on the screen is a common buzzard, and this is the bird of the year in Estonia. And so this is a typical thing to do in Estonian homes during this time of the day, just to look into those cameras and videos and peeping into birds' nests. But coming to my presentation, I would like to welcome you all. There are really a lot of people in the room here, now I can see. And I have a difficult task as well, because I would like to get you through, in a very short period of time, what is Estonian sustainable development like, and how sustainable are we, and to give you some of the indicators. So I would like to introduce a bit the evolution of sustainable development concept in Estonia, but also in respect to the world evolution of sustainable development. Also measuring sustainability of Estonia, what are the indicators that we have been using, and what do they tell us? And of course, since sustainable development is about the people and the planet, it's about dilemmas, everyday dilemmas. There are decision-making level dilemmas, there are global dilemmas. So what are the major challenges for Estonia? So Estonia, we used to say, is a small country. And several years ago, when I had a presentation in Shenzhen in China, there was a person just before me presenting his presentation saying there are 1.3 million people in a village in China. And I was talking after him, saying that I'm coming from a country of 1.3 million people. And our country is a little bit larger than the Netherlands, but of course the number of people is almost 15 times less. We are very unhappy that our fertility rate is so low. It should be at least to the global standards 2.1, but we are decreasing in this respect. The people are moving from countryside to the towns. We have more than 70% of people living in cities, and 1/3 of them actually in this very capital city of Tallinn. This leaves the country quite sparsely populated. We have only 32 people per square kilometer, which compared to, let's say, the UK, where more than 400, or in India, more than 1,000 people in 1 square kilometer. We are very much dependent on the sea, the Baltic Sea around us. And of course, as far as the nature and the climate is concerned, we are in a boreal bioregion, which tells a lot about how and what are the challenges for our region, even in the point of view of heating our houses or having warm summers. We are a flat country. The highest peak is little bit more than 300 meters, which is somewhere in this part of the country. And we have neighbors. We have immediate neighbors as Russia and Latvia, but we have also overseas neighbors like Finland and Sweden, and of course the neighborhood goes beyond even further. It's very important to note that we are also a member of the European Union. We are a member of OECD, and from the military or defense side, we are a member of the NATO. And what is always very important when you look at the country profile is where the energy comes from. As far as our country is concerned, this is the fossil fuel oil shale that we are burning mostly to get most of our energy. So the energy picture comes here, where the oil shale is being excavated in the northeastern part of Estonia. But most of the other areas are fairly less populated, nice areas, and especially that we are proud of the semi-natural habitats which are located on the seaside. The evolution of sustainable development concept in Estonia goes back to 1992, which is obviously an important date for many of the countries represented in this room, because this was the Rio conference in Rio, and the Estonian delegation was part of that. Herewith, I also have to acknowledge the very important contribution of the Finnish government at that time, who made it possible for Estonian, Latvian and Lithuanian delegations to be part of this process, or start this process. In 1995, the Act on Sustainable Development was passed by our parliament, and we used to be very proud of that, because it is the second Sustainable Development Act in the world after Costa Rica Parliament adopted their act. And already in the next year, Prime Minister commissioned a group of experts to be counseling his decisions. But to be critical about this commission and looking to the past, he didn't ask very much advice at that moment, and this commission was not very much consulted. 2005, a national strategy was adopted by the Parliament, and this is valid since then. So this year we celebrate 10th anniversary of this strategy. And there has been lots of discussions now whether we should start a new strategy, whether we should upgrade it, we should do it differently, we should put some other objectives, goals, targets, or we should just renew the indicators. And this was done already afterwards when the new indicators were upgraded. But 2009, a new type of Sustainable Development Commission was established, and not only as an NGO panel, but also as an interministerial working group. So there are two bodies that work at the government office since 2009. And as I said, the Sustainable Development Indicators were updated, and this year a special report was published where using already those new indicators. And there are discussions on how to meet the new targets of the UN post-2015 goals, the Sustainable Development Goals, and whether we should modify our indicators. So when I look back the Estonian Sustainable Development pathway, I would say it has been from the stool, let's say the more modified version, the 3 columns, to an integrated structure of social, economic and environmental issues, but rather in a balanced way, because the Sustainable Development Strategy explicitly says that we should keep those 4 major Sustainable Development Goals in a balance. So in decision making, they should be taken as equal nominators. As we widely know, there has been a perception worldwide that the sustainable development emerges in the area of overlap of economic, environmental and social issues. But this has not been the case, and we are still stuck somehow in this picture and this overlap thinking and it hasn't improved much of our everyday life and moving towards sustainable development. There has been a pyramid type of thinking as well, and the pyramids may look same from outside, but they are definitely different from inside. The Netherlands approach, as it was also referred earlier today, this people, planet, profit issue looks the same as the Finnish pyramid, but actually when you look into the content, they differ quite a lot, because the Finnish pyramid puts the fundamental as the nature or environment as a fundament to the pyramid. There has been a ladder type of thinking as well. So creating like a sustainable development as a process from the lower levels to the upper levels, from technology-oriented thinking to the holistic perception of sustainable development. And this has been much of the discussion whether the natural resources are replaceable or not. Stockholm Resilience Centre has, and the group over many years, starting from 2009, the first figure was published in the journal Nature, when they looked at the planetary boundaries and how these boundaries have been exceeded or crossed. And as you can see in this not very well depicted figure, but anyway, you can follow that the trends are increasing, that the human impact on the environment, both in the socio-economic terms, both in the Earth system terms, has been increasing. And this has left the scientists to the fact that at least in the three important sectors like the biodiversity loss, climate change, and nitrogen cycle, they have already crossed this safe operating boundary. This thinking was adapted by Kate Raworth in 2012 by saying that we are in the midst of donut economy, saying that the safe operating social boundaries should remain within the safe planetary boundaries. That all the things that the society needs, that the people need, should not exceed what the planet can actually offer and adjust. When it comes to human development in Estonia, and looking at those economic, environmental and social issues, we are really making quite a nice progress. Especially we are happy that the life expectancy has been increasing, although it is still a major difference between the women and men life expectancy, but they are now more closer than 10 years ago. The GDP per capita is increasing as well. Even the years of financial crisis, the global crisis and the local crisis, now we are recovering from that. We are happy that our employment rate is high, and we are really struggling that the people have their positions. People are at work. And, but on the other hand, this has been creating over more than, or a little bit over the past decade, that also the income inequality is increasing. We are happy that we are known for our E and at, and whatever it relates to the internet, web-based services, that although we are not in the very top of the EU countries on the left-hand side figure, but still I think we have a renowned history of, let's say, voting parliamentary and local elections via internet. And there are other things like e-government, e-citizenship, e-residency, and so forth. not speaking about, not mentioning about other already widely used services. However, we are very much car-oriented people. When we compare what has been the use of cars and compared to the public transport, then you can see that we are very much of the about 50% of the mobility is made by car. But what was perhaps quite an interesting outcome of the Sustainable Development Indicators Compendium published this year, that there is quite a significant difference between how men and women use the public transport or non-car vehicles. And as you can see, women are more about to use the public transport, go by foot or cycle. Education is definitely in. As you can see, compared to the other EU countries, Estonia is in the top countries where the tertiary education is very important, and also we are proud of the PISA results, where for many years we have been a top performance. However, also regarding the once very severe issues like we had the HIV and AIDS, especially in the mid-90s, but also in the early 2000s, as you can see the peak on the left-hand side. But now it has become really a dramatic decline, and hopefully this issue will be tackled more effectively. We are also alcohol drinkers together with many of the Nordic countries. But as you can see, we are still observing here a decline as well. So this is very good news for the society and for the policymakers. When it comes to the environment, then of course the water quality is one of the issues that bothers us. And although the status of surface waters has been improving, but still, as you can know, this year there is an EU target that all the water should be in good environmental condition. As far as the coastal waters are concerned, you can see this yellow is the equivalent to poor waters, and only 2 areas are green, which are really in good shape. Air emissions are unfortunately also high, both due to transport and due to our energy sector. So as you can see from this figure, the energy sector contributes almost 80% of our greenhouse gases. And we are, as I said, we love cars, we like big cars. So the new passenger cars also are quite fuel consuming. They are CO2 emitters compared to the other countries, like we can see the Netherlands, Greece, Portugal, Denmark, that are at the other side of the figure. The greenhouse gas emissions per capita are also rather high. You can see we are almost the second country among the EU countries, but this is largely due to our energy sector. We are very proud of our biodiversity, our nature, and we are especially like to communicate that the semi-natural habitats are our soul and everyday habits. The coastal, alluvial, wooded and dry meadows, we are the most species-rich areas, habitats. And there is a place in the Western Estonia where 76 species per square meter has been recorded. So our government puts quite a big attention and also budget in order to manage those areas. The Natura 2000 network is also very important. Here you can see the blue areas, which are bird areas, and the other spotted spots are habitat areas, and when they both coincide. So we have quite large areas at sea and smaller areas on the land. But these are very good areas also for education, for doing work in the nature and to learn nature. But putting all that together, both the human development, the social economic issues, and also the biodiversity. So comparing the ecological footprint and the human development index, Estonia is actually still following the path that many of the European countries or advanced countries follow, that we have exceeded the biocapacity, but on the other hand, or at the same time, we are with high human development. So we haven't very much succeeded to decouple those two things. But what bothers us most is, of course, our population, our nation. This is perhaps something unique to Estonia, that we always talk about that we are in decline and we are aging. Of course, aging is not something that is only typical to Estonia, but still in terms of that the population is in decline. Of course, the aging problem is a big issue as well. So the statistical office has provided several scenarios how the population would change, and here you can see that this gray area is how it looked like in 2006, and there are several scenarios but they more or less follow the same path, that we are getting less and less young people. And this also affects the schooling system, it affects our social system. And interestingly, that when we look at how happy we are, I found a World Happiness map, and it really made me question this map, because as you can see, although the Estonia is very little here, but it is orange color. So it gives a message that we are not very happy people. We are somehow concerned and troubled, or whatever word to use. So I don't know whether we want always something else, so something more. We have our ambitions, and it needs to be figured out yet why we are not happy with the life that we have at the moment. So lots of interesting questions for social scientists. And finally, I would like to say that everything starts at school, in the classroom, and the government, together with different funds, has put really very substantial input and funding in order to make the sustainable development, not only the environmental issues, but also coupled with the economic and social ones. And Rea will talk more about that. But this is in a classroom, but of course everything should be put into practice. And this is just a photo from yesterday where our institute was planting trees in order to reduce our carbon footprint that we do every year. So thank you for your attention.
hairdo okay? So I would like to first raise your hand who knows me. Most of you. I'm really happy to see you again and very welcome everybody who are my new acquaintances. I'm going to talk about environmental education and to give a little bit of information. But as we discussed with Kaja before, she's really strong in figures, and she knows very much about the background of development of sustainability here in Estonia. And I'm trying to give a little bit of something beneath the numbers. So when we think about a little bit of history, just to have a flashback to history, I would actually like to start with a quote from Val Plumwood. And as everybody can see, yes, this is actually underpinning the whole presentation I'm going to have right now. And I really strongly believe that our connection to the land is very important. I also live in the countryside, in the neighboring county where Mr. Onnemat lives. So I think we won't trade living in the country for anything else. Am I right? Yes. I think you have a connection to the countryside as well. All the time. So Estonia has been a nation of country people. And as Marek said, we can see that it's a little bit like vanishing. So, but we still got it. We remember things that are crucial and important. And when thinking about environmental education, it dates back already 1919, when we can see the records where environmental education was taught in Estonia. Of course, Second World War and Soviet times brought some change, but as nation close to nature, we continue to explore and study about the nature. So in different nature clubs, also in extracurricular activities, in nature centers. So there were nature centers established in the bigger cities, in Tallinn, Tartu, Pärnu. And although the names changed, but they are still there, and we can see some fancy pictures. That means we have renovated or built new centers that are really great environments for learning about nature and in nature as well. So if you have the chance to visit either Pärnu or Tartu Nature House, it would be a great opportunity to see what they are doing there. So most of the activities are either training or programs for children, excursions organized there, and there are also live animals living in those centers, so they are really like isolates in the cities. So here we can see a map of different centers that either teach or learn environmental education or sustainability education. And with color green, we can see the spots there. And these are the centers that belong to the coordination of the Ministry of Environment. And the dots that are in purple are mostly either NGOs or other organizations dealing with environmental education. So there are about 100 of them, so all over Estonia. And in fact, State Forest Department is quite strong organization or well known for environmental education. Environmental Board has really been active in organizing regional environment education conferences lately, and they are coordinating also the same project we already we were mentioning in the beginning of the conference. So those activities are all that you are engaged in yourself, in your countries, sharing experience, sharing methods, tools, having deeper and more technological debates about education. So this is something that we probably share, or this is the similar things in our countries. When we think about national school curriculum, in 1996, Estonia included the topic environment as a cross-curricular topic. And in 2002, the topic was environment as sustainable development. So actually, in our schools, all teachers, all subjects should include some sort of sustainability education topics or discussions. This is on paper. But real life is sometimes something else. And when we come to the education for sustainable development, there are a lot of questions, actually, when we think from the teacher's point of view. We're talking about inter and multi and transdisciplinarity, but what does it mean when I'm standing in front of the classroom? How should I teach all subjects at the same time? So there are needs for more discussions. What is sustainability or sustainable development? Education for sustainable development? Or should we lose the word development at all and talk about sustainable contraction instead? So there are a lot of questions related to that level as well. But besides methods and tools and techniques, I think most important, as I see it, is personal connection to something that has some dots on the screen. And this is something that we are going to discover during the conference here. What has been going on lately? We can say that from 2010, European Union has remarkably supported the development of the whole field of education for sustainable development. And in particular, I would like to mention an extensive in-service training program for different target groups that took place in 2013 up till now, 2015. And it was for kindergarten teachers, school teachers, university teachers, also non-formal environmental specialists, environment education specialists. The program was coordinated by Environmental Board and implemented by two universities in Estonia, Tallinn University and Tartu University, and we had altogether nearly 600 participants all over Estonia. And we discussed different theoretical frameworks and dimensions of sustainability, but also we paid a lot of attention on active learning methods and little bit scratching the surface of this classical sustainability understanding. The courses were about 3 and 6 credits. So this shows a little bit of the volume or the size of the program. I can't present the final results of the research that was taken at the same time of the program, but a little bit preliminary results. We can see that in the beginning of this training program, education for sustainable development was mostly seen as environmental education related to nature protection or garbage recycling or resource efficiency, topics like that. But at the end of the program, the teachers and environment education specialists, they expressed more of sustainability or education for sustainability being a question of values, morality, worldviews, and connection. And since my own personal interest is the emergence of ecological self or ecological subjectivity in people and especially in teachers, I was seeking for that, and it emerged in the statements given by the participants, so they were extremely interesting for me as well. So the spiritual dimensions and connectedness were really present there. A little bit in the beginning of the training program and more at the end. So, but I think we're here today and tomorrow and the day after for thinking about the future, visioning the future, and what is education and what is learning at large. Is it more education or deeper education, or what do we actually need? So the discussion about the essence or the foundation or the philosophy education of sustainability would be an interesting discussion. Starting from the terms, which I already mentioned. I think it was Fritjof Capra who said that we shouldn't be paralyzed with analyzing or going into really deep discussions and long discussions about terms and definitions. But somehow the words create the meaning and the meaning creates the world. So what we are actually saying matters. So I'm somehow inclined to these last definitions on the slide, saying that we should maybe talk about sustainable underdevelopment or sustainable contraction. Arjen Wals, who is present today or tomorrow, I can't see him, talks about unlearning unsustainability. And there's a difference there. Should we learn sustainability or unlearn unsustainability? Because we are so used to certain mindsets and habits and routines that unlearning those might be much more difficult than learning something new. And how to redefine knowledge. Knowledge and learning, these two notions we as teachers or educationalists are working every day. So either knowledge is value neutral or linear as we are used to, or is it emergent and dynamic and self-organizing? And should learning involve ecological subjectivity as being the deep connection between people and the planet as well? Should we talk more about acquiring tools and methods, or should we talk about being and becoming a person and a teacher? I frankly don't know how can we separate that. So the notion of teacher professional identity is somewhat vague because we have one big identity. So discussing what have been neglected or what we have forgotten could be one question. Because I have noticed through my own experience when we talk about philosophical questions or deeper layers of sustainability education, people recognize things. It's not difficult to approach these discussions on a very personal level because it reminds us of something that is already there. So I think we have a lot of challenges ahead, but a lot of recognition as well. So what this learning in a context of sustainability should look like, or how should we define it, is these are not my words. As you see, the editors' names of the book issued this year are stating that we should definitely address root causes of the crisis of unsustainability. That means recycling is something that we should do as a routine. And it's not the question, how do we recycle garbage, but why the garbage is there in the first place, and how it's connected with our needs and what needs to be changed there. We should challenge underlying paradigms and value systems and stories we are speaking even, or metaphors we are using, that contribute to the disconnection between people and the planet. So what kind of definitions we are using when we say we need to protect nature, or we need to establish the notion of ecosystem services as labeling prices on nature. Learning should involve social action and spiritual and very intimate dimensions, which are really scarce in our schools. Do we really plan 2 lessons a week to talk about the soul? Maybe if we're teachers of religion or something, but not really. What does it mean that learning needs to be transdisciplinary? How can we take the the teacher of physics and mathematics and teacher of English at the same time in the same room and work on a real-life problem. If sometimes we even don't understand each other's language, so to say. We should look at resources that we have forgotten. That means indigenous cultures, indigenous wisdom, actually. Our heritage, which is the connection to the ancient wisdom that has lasted for thousands of years and still is there. We need to rely on deep immersion or deep connection to nature and intrinsic valuing of nature. That nature is sacred, and there are things there that we are never, ever capable of measuring or dissecting. Learning needs to be localizing. That means localized. That means, I remember a good saying, I don't remember who said it, but he said that globalization has only value when it contributes to localization. So even if we learn the facts about the world, we should feel the connection that I can do or use these facts for my own county or village or town. And it needs to happen everywhere, not only in schools or universities. Sometimes more learning happens outside of schools, as we know. So when we move closer to classroom practices, what does it mean? What actually we need to learn ourselves, and of course together with students, is empathy and love. And can we really teach them? Can you make somebody love you? It's a tricky thing, but it's worthwhile thinking about it. Or how can we sense nature and self as sacred? There is a wonderful philosopher and educationalist, Satish Kumar, who talks about reverential ecology. And he says that we shouldn't forget that God is living in nature and God is living inside us. And this is not a spiritual talk only, which it is as well, but it is something that remembers or reminds us that there are things that we don't understand, that they are sacred in a sense that we shouldn't maybe touch them so violently. Maybe we should think twice or feel awkwardness before we go deeper. And the knowing that everything is connected or the whole system's thinking, that is a very familiar term to most of us, and everybody agrees to that. Do you agree that everything is connected? Could you raise your hand? Everything is connected. But in everyday life, we're living opposite that. I don't know why. I try, but we should think about motivation in a way that we should have the will to do something, the need to do something. And when I think back to Abraham Maslow, everybody knows his pyramid. It's not really a pyramid. You have to turn it upside down, it becomes a circle. And inside of the circle, as Maslow himself says, our most deepest need is actually our altruistic mission to do something good. This is how humanity is defined, not by bread and butter only. So these are the dimensions that we're discussing with students. We should think about courage, how to teach courage, also courage to stand for something or to make a difference and to make a lot of mistakes as well. Do we punish people for mistakes? No. Like hell we do. We need to have mindfulness about the time, this connection between our ancestors and descendants. This brings in actually the feeling of responsibility. We're getting a message from our grandfathers and grandmothers, an important message that we should pass to our children and grandchildren. Joanna Macy has wonderful methodology about actual games or activities. How do you teach this mindfulness about the time? We should teach mindfulness about the place, the connection to place, which David Orr is talking about also quite a lot. And he was supposed to be here, but really, really sad that he couldn't come, but that's life. But mindfulness about the place that when we feel the deep connection with a certain place and are able to protect it, the world becomes our home. We should not forget the intuition, the power of intuition to make the difference between right and wrong. And we should also recognize that the only right decisions in the world are decisions that contribute to beauty, balance, and continuity of life. And this could be the only criteria we have, in politics as well. So, seeing connection and beauty, I would like to show you a small video, and as a tribute to Aldo Leopold, always when I hear the sentence, a fierce green light in the eyes of a wolf, I remember Aldo Leopold, a famous environmentalist many of you know, and a really deep ecologist in that sense. Do you believe that wolves change rivers? Really, do you believe that wolves change rivers? Could you raise your hand? Some. I'm a little bit skeptic as well. But I'm going to show you the video. Nope.
One of the most exciting scientific findings of the past half-century has been the discovery of widespread trophic cascades. A trophic cascade is an ecological process which starts at the top of the food chain and tumbles all the way down to the bottom. And the classic example is what happened in the Yellowstone National Park in the United States when wolves were reintroduced in 1995. Now, we all know that wolves kill various species of animals, but perhaps we're slightly less aware that they give life to many others. Before the wolves turned up, they'd been absent for 70 years, that the numbers of deer, because there was nothing to hunt them, had built up in the Yellowstone Park, and despite efforts by humans to control them, they'd managed to reduce much of the vegetation there to almost nothing. They'd just grazed it away. But as soon as the wolves arrived, even though they were few in number, they started to have the most remarkable effects. First, of course, they killed some of the deer, but that wasn't the major thing. Much more significantly, they radically changed the behavior of the deer. The deer started avoiding certain parts of the park, the places where they could be trapped most easily, particularly the valleys and the gorges. And immediately those places started to regenerate. In some areas, the height of the trees quintupled in just 6 years. Bare valley sides quickly became forests of aspen and willow and cottonwood. And as soon as that happened, the birds started moving in. The number of songbirds and migratory birds started to increase greatly. The number of beavers started to increase because beavers like to eat the trees. And beavers, like wolves, are ecosystem engineers. They create niches for other species. And the dams they built in the rivers provided habitats for otters and muskrats and ducks and fish and reptiles and amphibians. The wolves killed coyotes, and as a result of that, the number of rabbits and mice began to rise, which meant more hawks, more weasels, more foxes, more badgers. Ravens and bald eagles came down to feed on the carrion that the wolves had left. Bears fed on it too, and their population began to rise as well, partly also because there were more berries growing on the regenerating shrubs. And the bears reinforced the impact of the wolves by killing some of the calves of the deer. But here's where it gets really interesting. The wolves changed the behavior of the rivers. They began to meander less. There was less erosion. The channels narrowed. More pools formed. More riffle sections, all of which were great for wildlife habitats. The rivers changed in response to the wolves. And the reason was that the regenerating forests stabilized the banks so that they collapsed less often, so that the rivers became more fixed in their course. Similarly, by driving the deer out of some places and the vegetation recovering on the valley sides, there was less soil erosion because the vegetation stabilized that as well. So the wolves, small in number, transformed not just the ecosystem of the Yellowstone National Park, this huge area of land, but also its physical geography.
How many of you now believes that wolves change rivers? Okay, thank you. That was actually the end of my presentation, but I would like to give my personal thanks to Wolfgang Brumner from Uppsala University, Sverige, who brought me the world. And could you raise your hand so everybody can see you? And please ask him, what is it? When you have a chance. Thank you.
You told a lot about what you have discussed with teachers. Could you bring out maybe some of their thoughts as well, just as an example?
Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Can we share the secret, what you told me? I think the one very practical example I would like to draw is that when we started the discussions about education for sustainability, it was really like teachers from mother language or teachers from mathematics who asked that, okay, shall I start teaching environment now? I don't know anything about it, or something like that. But when we finished the course on the last day, when we discussed such value approaches and things like that, then there were so many cases. I personally met about 400 teachers, and in really many cases they said that, okay, but I can do that. Yes, being humane, love each other, love nature, and really think about it. This is sustainability. I can do that. So that is really encouraging, and that gives a little bit ease to this topic, because it seems like something new we should learn, but it's not. It's an old and ancient thing.
Okay, thank you. We have time for questions. If you have questions to Kaja or Rea, please. Yes, please, but wait for a microphone, please. Here.
Yes, my name is Evelyn Tamm. I have a question for Kaja. You continue your work, and of course I'm also partly from Estonia, and very eager to know, how do you feel about the new Prime Minister and the cooperation for the future? Thank you.
To be politically correct, of course, I should say that I don't know yet, since the coalition has been working for such a short time yet. So let's see what life brings. But of course, on the other hand, we have the principal ideas written in the coalition agreement. So we can forecast what the coalition is planning to do. As far as the sustainable development is concerned, of course, there is again a very interesting case these days, which illustrates very well the dilemma that we have and what the politicians and the decision makers have. Many of you in the auditorium coming from Estonia may know that now there is a debate about the excise tax on cars on fuel. And so on one hand, this is a very environmental issue, but on the other hand, it has been turned into a financial or fiscal issue, how to replenish the state budget just to bring in extra finances. So these are the very typical, I would say, everyday dilemmas that we have at our personal level, but also at state level. What is the best thing to do in order to aim for some long-term goals and also, but at the same time to decide and solve very practical everyday issues like driving a car, paying for the fuel, and what are the different options in order to be more sustainable, to be more environmentally friendly. But the major thing I think nowadays in this discussion that we're having in Estonia is perhaps that the impacts of some of the decisions were not properly assessed in due time, and that's why. And probably the second issue, just my personal view, is that to the communication of the changes was probably made in a rush, and would have needed much more time in order to explain to the people, explain the options, explain what are the longer-term goals that we probably have to take now. Thank you.
Please.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Is the question to me?
I don't know. One of you. I'm Tove Holm from Sykli Environmental School of Finland, and I'm curious to hear how the future is looking in Estonia, and especially about if you're working on the global action program on ESD somehow on the Estonian level.
Regarding major goals, directions into the future, we are still taking into account or following the national strategy on sustainable development. The Sustainable Estonia 21 is the name of the document. So this is the umbrella document that has to be incorporated into all other sectoral plans, strategies, policies. Of course, the other issue is whether this document is followed, or our assessment is that it's perhaps more on a conceptual level rather than putting into an operation. But on the other hand, as I was showing on the basis of the indicators, I think that since we are, I would say, indicator country, so we would like to measure things and to understand how we are progressing and moving and what are the problems and challenges. So in this respect, I would say that we are still monitoring how we are making the future and what are the pathways to the future. But more or less, I think we are following what is being done in the EU in general, also our immediate neighbors, lots of cooperation and taking an example, good examples perhaps. I hope that we are not taking the bad examples, but yeah, so it's more a I would say European pathway that we are taking, and of course there are example countries that we would like to follow, including the Scandinavian countries included.
Any other questions?
Something for Rea as
yes,
well,
in the back there.
Yes, hello, good afternoon. I'm from the Finton community in Scotland. My name is Sue Clutterbuck, and I'd like to connect with Rea.
I thought so.
One of the mediums or forms of learning, and you've already mentioned deep ecology, but you've also brought very much into focus the element of connecting with our inner scapes, looking at the relationship of our soul selves and our real nature to come into alignment with our real nature, to also connect with outer nature. Would you include, for example, transpersonal learning as a form or a way of approaching the wonder and mysticism of the natural world and reawakening that in children? And maybe one of the ways of doing that is by encouraging sanctuary spaces to happen in schools where children can go to be still and be quiet.
Yes, thank you for the question. And before I answer to that, I would encourage everybody to look at Sue's direction. Could you raise your hand, Sue, once more? Look at her and try to catch her during the coffee break and ask what she's doing. It's really fascinating. But as an answer to your question, I would use a little bit another word like transhuman dimension in learning, which is the same, I think. What you meant is that, and it is connected with our deeper selves in that sense that we should be able to look at the world with eyes from of other beings, and this other being can be our other self that is connected to the planet on a very core, deep level. And I think the learning process there needs time, physical time, as you mentioned, peace and quiet, contemplation, sensing, connecting to your emotions and other senses. And I know that in many schools in Europe, in fact, they actually established the tradition to have some kind of meditation room or just a quiet room. And there have been research also conducted which shows that there is a clear correlation between academic achievement. The children really, their academic results go up. So we have somehow exaggerated that part of the learning which stresses being fast, more, quick, fun, whistles, and lights everywhere. But it's not about certain kind of children who need peace and contemplation, but it's about all of us that need it. And we sometimes either forget it or can't think about it. And I think this is one of the crucial parts of what education and learning should involve. I hope I answered to your question.